Your friends, your friends. Radio friends again. Radio friends again. We've got a lot to share.
And welcome to another edition of Radio Friends again. This being, let's see if I get it right this time. Is this the, wait a minute, hang on a second. 13th. This is the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Good lucky day to get all my radio friends together. I'm Steve Parker here in Berlin, Connecticut. Got a nice group of people around here. John Landry is there, and he's coming to us he's in his vacation home in East Hampton.
Good morning.
Finally got that right. Pete Salant, where are you at? You in Virginia or what?
Yeah, Norfolk, Virginia, down in southeast Virginia near the North Carolina line. And it's a sort of a decent day.
Good. And Dave Overson's still doing time. He's still here in Connecticut for another week or so, 2 weeks, or what are you doing?
We're here till the 28th of September. Then we're heading back south to Bob Marks country, and we'll be getting together with them, I hope. And then going on another couple of cruises this winter. One in January, then one in April. You know, what can I tell you?
Y'all should
Somebody's
live
got to do it.
vicariously through Dave. All right, and Bob Craig is here. Good morning, my children. How are you, Bob?
I am stable. How are you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, let's see who else is coming in here. There's Tracy Carmen. Hi, Tracy.
Good morning, Steve, from beautiful Longmeadow, Massachusetts.
All right. And Bob is in the Philly area there. And the judge here, Marlborough, Connecticut, Judge?
Yes, good morning. I'm here in Command Central in my vast communication empire here in Marlborough, Connecticut.
Right. Ron Pell. Good morning, Ron. How are you?
I'm doing good, Steve. Thank you. Still here in Cheshire.
All right. Good. Bob
Tebow
Marks.
is here.
Bob, how's everything going on the home front, Bob? What's happening down in Florida?
Things are okay, Steve. Things are okay, but I'm coming to you live from Vero Beach, Florida, otherwise known as where the tropics begin.
Is that right?
Yeah. Matter of fact, our local radio station is WTTB, where the tropics begin.
Huh?
And
Right here on the Indian River Lagoon, the beautiful Atlantic Ocean is just a few miles east of where I live. I used to live right there in a community that was a gated community right on the ocean, and I was like 5 houses away from the actual ocean. I felt like I was living like a multi-millionaire if I was in Connecticut, but here the house only, I think I bought it for like $320. That was back in '87. Now that same neighborhood, that same house is 1.5 mil.
I have no doubt. Now you ain't near the water, I'm sure. Although with hurricanes and issues like that, you wonder, and global warming, but nothing's cheap on the water.
And Ron is in the Shire, Cheshire, right?
I'm in the Shire, yeah. I still am.
And let's see, we've got Dave Nagel. Hi, Dave. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, and you're also in Connecticut, right?
Oh yeah, up in scenic Plainville, home of the annual Balloon Fest.
We know that Jack Carney is attempting to get on. This is his first time. He's fooling with a Chromebook. So he's trying to see if there's a microphone on the Chromebook. And then who do we have here? Are you just joining us, Norm, for the first time?
No, I've been with you once before.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Norm. What's your last name?
Tebow.
Oh, God. Okay. There we go. That's right. I see you. I've seen you on my list before. All right.
Welcome aboard, Norm.
Thank you. The Winter Radio connection.
That's it. That's right.
Yes.
Plus, I've worked with Pete quite often over the years. Hi, Russ. How you doing?
Hi, Norm. How you doing, brother?
Good.
Norm and I have known each other since my very first week in college radio in 1968.
Wow.
560 WNEU. It's Rusty Nail.
So
that's why we all love jingles.
I've got 2 radio brothers here, Norm and Pete.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We were talking about how radio has changed, and I think, Russ, one of the things I'm curious about is how long have you been an owner? And because of all the things that have been happening, with the big mega groups coming in and everything, how does that affect somebody like you who maybe still does some buying and selling of radio stations?
Well, the first station I ever owned was in 1992. And that's when they had docket, what was it called? 1080,
8090?
8090. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, docket 8090. I got one of those stations in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and did well and parlayed that into buying a station in Miami, then 2 stations in Miami, then 3 more in Fort Wayne, then another one in Indianapolis. But eventually what happened was, after the 1998 Telecommunications Act, which I don't have to even elaborate on, you guys all know it as well as I do, it crushed the little guys. Because if you had a station in Indianapolis, even if you were doing great, I mean, we were even with WFPQ in most day parts, but what they would do is simply throw in all the other stations free and you were out. So you could be number 1 in the market, and if you were competing against a conglomerate, you were dead. And so eventually that's what killed me. I mean, the good news is I got out of my 2 Miami stations for huge money and did not reinvest all of it into radio, only put a small portion back in.
Boy,
it's an example of the government not knowing what the hell they're doing. When they loosen up the rules, they go way too far. The pendulum always swings way too far. They should have said, great, you want to own as many stations as you want? Super. You can own 2 or 3 in a market. That's it. And then that would have given a chance to smaller operators to compete. Instead, they put all the power in 3 people's hands.
Somewhere I have a flow chart. I'll have to see if I can find it from when they started doing the deregulation. It basically shows all these companies all funneling down to 2.
You got it, Tracy.
Find that thing.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Hey, Ron, with all the stations that you dealt with when you were with CRN, how many of them at that point in time were smaller groups, and who are some of those smaller groups that maybe well, I know you've been out for a while, that maybe still exist?
Yeah. I couldn't remember. It's funny you mentioned that, Steve, the way we're talking about this. But yeah, there's still, I mean, the numbers are hazy in my mind, but the number of licenses at one point, how many stations were there? 13, 14,000 radio stations. And even with the conglomerates, it's still, and to Russ's point, I mean, yeah, absolutely. In the major markets, you get hammered. I mean, look at DRC. We were competing with iHeart and CBS at the time, and I was trying to keep my head above water. This is in the early 2000s, trying to make money. And DRC, Heritage radio station ratings were good. But Russ, you're right. I mean, they would say, well, I'll give you a KISS and we'll throw in the river, or I'll buy the river and we'll throw in the POP or whatever.
Exactly, Ron.
Just tough to compete with that. So, and then the other big problem, as you can obviously know about, is trying to recruit good salespeople. They want to go where the fame and fortune is. DRC. Why would I want to be a DRC if I can go to iHeart and I can rep 5 stations, and you guys got these little AMs and one good FM? But so that was the hard part. But at CRN, Steve, the small, like I use Chrysler as an example, the Ram buy that you did. You were obviously involved in that. We were in 140 markets on over 400 radio stations. But a lot of those were small markets, and the small markets, you're dealing with really a lot of mom and pops. And that was always better because they were always willing to work with you better and do more, and they didn't have as much rules and regulations. So the majority of stations, I think they're still small market stations, but go to anywhere in the top 50 markets, you're at the mercy of iHeart and Odyssey and whoever else.
It was so great to deal with some of those smaller markets. I mean, because you would go from dealing with LA to literally a guy in his basement who's on the air, who's doing great in the market, and he's like, mentions in passing that he changed his call letters. I'm like, when
we did the World Baseball Classic, I had to buy time of all places, the Imperial Valley in California. That's basically the desert, and you're dealing with radio stations. I was dealing with these small radio stations. We had to buy Hispanic radio because it was the World Baseball Classic, and I was buying these small, little, tiny stations in not Yuma, Arizona. I forgot the market. Maybe it's Yuma, California, a little southeastern California, right on the Mexican border. And these people, and I don't speak Spanish, and I was at a disadvantage because these people didn't speak real great English, but they spoke great Spanish. And I'm trying to get on, for $5 a spot. I'm trying to get as many spots as I can. And I remember that Dick called sign on the line. He would remember those days. But these are small radio stations,
Now,
That's
what
what it
about
is.
what about Saga? I mean, how many?
Yeah, that was a medium sized. I don't know if you remember, everybody in Connecticut remembers his name, Warren Lotta. Warren was a sales guy at TIC for many years, and then went to Saga, where he became the number 2 or 3 guy. He's retired now. He made a lot of money with a guy named Ed Christian. Ed Christian owns Saga Broadcasting, and they were in the mostly Midwest. They owned Rock 102 in Springfield for a while, but they were mostly a Midwestern group, and they maybe had 15 or 20 or 30 stations, if that. And that was, Midwestern, another one called, I think, Midwestern Family Broadcasting or something like that. That was another one we dealt with. Mid levels, not thousands or hundreds of stations, but 20, 30, 40 stations. Well, Buckley, at one point, Buckley had 20 radio stations.
Well, yeah, and I remember when you were talking about the insane money he was offered for OR, and what would OR be worth today?
$250 million. He turned it down.
Wow.
True story.
That's Claudia.
Wow.
That's Claudia is just joining us this morning, and
Hi.
Claudia Denise,
Claudia.
Claudia Feeney. And,
Hi, honey.
So now we have to remember that we have a woman in our presence. So let's make it twice as
Don't
great.
say shit.
You got to be nice.
To Ron's point.
You got an Italian. You got an Italian woman in your presence, so watch
we'll
it.
Be careful. We'll be careful. what's that? Was that you, Russ?
Yeah, it was. To Ron's point, at the peak, a stick in Miami sold for $100 million. And
With no
now
cash
that
flow?
same stick can be bought for about $8 million.
Was that WIOD, Russ?
No, it was WTMI.
CMI, okay.
Which was a classical. Woody Tanger owned it.
Woody,
and
yes.
It was probably breaking even. They didn't subscribe to Arbitron. They played classical music, blah, blah, blah. And they sold it to then, I guess it was Cox at the time, for $100 million, a stick.
Mm.
And today you can buy a stick in Miami for $8 million, $9 million.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
Russ, her name is Kim Guthrie. Do anybody know that name?
Yeah.
She was running Cox Radio, and I think they put her in charge of the whole thing after a while. I almost went to work for her. Nice lady, actually, back in the day.
Now, what about Connoisseur? How big is Connoisseur?
They're not that big, Steve. I mean, they have the Connecticut radio stations, and I think they have a couple of stations, one on Long Island, and I think maybe 2 or 3 in the Midwest somewhere. That's about it. I mean, he's maybe 10 or 15 radio stations, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. I was after we lost Jimmy Buffett, I was kind of skimming around YouTube to see what was out there, and he did a great interview on LNG, and I guess it's almost like right around the corner from his house. And that's the Long Island station, right?
Yeah, it's an oldie station.
Yeah.
That's where Rusty Potts ended up. You may still
Lots
be
of the
there.
program.
Yeah.
92 FM.
My God, these names. Wow.
And what happened was, I guess they saw him in Sag Harbor or something, and they said, "Geez, could we do an interview?" And he said, "Sure." And he came over, and it was so great because it was must have been the end of 2022. He'd been fighting cancer for 4 years. And but being in the studio, they did a little bit on the air, but at the chat in the studio with him and the producer and the on-air talent, they were just so thrilled that he was in there. And he was just happy to be with them. And he was going over a lot of stuff about cancer. And he said that for 4 years he'd been fighting it. But one of the things when he was doing 12 to 14 hours a day in a hospital room, he said that's when he got back to writing. And when you hear things like Bubbles Up and that kind of stuff on his new well, it's been out now for a while. There's a lot of songs there that he wrote while he was going through all this. And when you think about it, and then you go back and listen to that album, you know, you realize where his head was at, and he was putting out some pretty heavy duty stuff. But the best part is, I mean, at one point they must have had him for an hour or so, back and forth, checking the studio when the mics weren't even on to the air. And one of the things they said, well, what do you want to close out with? And he goes, let's do Margaritaville. That one's been pretty good to me.
Yeah.
And that's like he's got a song out there called Mailbox Money too, which is, you know, how much of the money that he would get from all of these songs. You know,
A very rare form of skin cancer, believe it or not. And that's what that did him in, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's Markle, right?
What's that?
Markle? I think it's called Markle.
Oh, it could be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just knew it was a skin cancer. Yeah.
And it's a very, very bad one. But I think he felt at that point, I think he felt like he was, you know, that he had it under control. But yeah, we just lost him a short while ago. But you know, but it was really cool where, you know, you see a station like that, probably the last interview he did. You know, and they just
He was walking by the studio, and they saw him out there, and he came in and did the interview.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you have a chance to go on YouTube and look that one up, it's he was just in there having a lot of fun. He was thrilled they were playing this new album, and just you know, I mean, just really great to see that. And it reminds you, you know, what you can do when you have a local radio station like that.
Question for you all, since we're talking about values of radio stations, stick values, and everything else. What do you know? You have companies like Odyssey, or as I refer to it, Audacity, out there, and the other ones that are basically selling. I mean, I wouldn't buy a radio station today. I grew up listening to WHYN, the 560, 5,000 watt killer up the road, which they sold off some of the land to put in a solar farm. And all these stations have sold off their real estate. You know, there are tower companies that own these things. What's the value in buying a radio station? I remember when WARE was on the market, and they were trying to get me and a few other people to buy it as a group. Gosh, I'm talking in the late 90s, because my wife was still around. And they at that point they were looking for 350 with no real estate. They wanted to keep the real estate. It was owned by some guys that had a diaper laundering service, and they wanted to keep it because of the AT&T sub towers next to their main one. And I understand that it was bought by the current folks, with Kurt Jackson and all those people, for like 300, including the real estate. But a lot of these stations have sold off their real estate. So what are you really buying if you're buying a radio station today?
They sell the real estate because if there's a tower on it, the multiples the multiples of cash flow are greater for the tower than they are for the radio station.
Oh,
so it's accretive to the value of the radio station to sell the towers and pay the rent.
Well, I mean, they sold WACE up here. They put the transmitter is on top of WMAS, is down by the Connecticut River, but the real estate value was worth more than the station. And they did that with WREB.
It's in Tracy in particular, though. It's when there's still the tower there, because the power consolidators, just like the radio consolidators, were paying more. You know, there became a place where the towers and radio stations crossed in value. When I sold my stations, it was 12-time multiple, and maybe towers were an 8-time multiple. And then by the time I was done selling, years later, radio stations were going for a 7 or an 8-time multiple, and towers were going for a 12-time multiple. So it was accretive to the whole value to sell the tower and just pay the rent.
You're basically triple net, collecting a check at the other end in front of the mailbox, to sit by the mailbox and let the money roll in.
Buckley sold his stations, including 6 acres of valuable downtown Bloomfield real estate, plus the transmitters, plus the property, plus 5 radio stations for $7.3 million. And that was, I don't know how many years ago it is already. And at one point, DRC FM alone was valued at $25 million. And after Rick Buckley died, the whole family had their hands out. Give us our money and let us get out of here. They just didn't want to be in radio anymore, and they had to sell. When I saw Joe Bellotta, another a guy who died sadly way too young, I ran into him at an NAB meeting and I said, "What are you doing now?" He says, "Basically, I'm in the real estate sales business. I'm selling off all the real estate from all the radio stations that Buckley owned, just because every time Rick Buckley would buy a radio station, he would try and buy the property that where the station resided. So
Smart.
he had all this property, and they had about 12 or 15 stations in California. So at the end, you know, and families, the edict by the family was sell off all this stuff. We want our money. We want to cash out. So Joe Bellata became a real estate agent basically at the end of his career.
God.
What happened? What happened to Buckley's nephew who was in it? He's totally out.
Eric, he at the time was running DRC, the FM and the AMs, and he loved it. That was his life. And then they sold, you know, everybody came, you know, his stepsister, stepbrother, his sister, they all came and said, "Eric, we're selling it. We're selling it." And he was very upset about that. So they all cashed out, and they were all wealthy to begin with. He took his money and he bought 5 radio stations in San Luis Obispo in the Central Coast in Florida, where he owns 5. And he just recently bought 2 radio stations, small stations in Monterey. A woman named Marianne Emilio, most of you guys probably don't know her. Marianne was national sales manager at DRC for many years. Well, of course, Dave, you know her. And she lives in Greenwich, but she's still Eric's national sales manager. And of the 7 radio stations he owns, 2 are pretty powerful FMs in the Central Coast of California, and the others are just kind of, you know, smaller, couple of smaller FMs, a few AMs, but those 2 generate a lot of revenue, and that's what he's doing. He owns 7 radio stations.
Wow.
Looks like
And he
Dick, it
renamed
looks
it
like
Dimes. So Buckley's name was Richard Dimes Buckley Jr. or the third, whatever, and he named the name of his broadcast company Dimes Broadcasting.
yes. All right, we got Dick Call jumping in this morning, and also Jim Harrington. Morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning. I have a Rick Buckley story with regard to selling too. But that had to do with the New York Giants. Ron,
we've heard that story.
You know that's all right. I won't go into it.
Hey, I just got a question. Does anybody know of a guy? He was a DJ, still is. Who was overnights on DRC back, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, named Robert O'Brien. No? Okay. Well, I was talking to Joe Orlando yesterday, who traffic manager at DRC was. And this guy, Robert O'Brien, Leschak is his real last name.
Bob O'Brien?
Bob O'Brien. That's
Bob O'Brien sounds
O'Brien.
familiar. Yeah.
He worked up here in Springfield too.
He's out in New Jersey now, but this guy is an extra in every movie you've ever seen. And he has a thriving career as an extra in all sorts of movies. Besides being a DJ, also an author, a writer. He has a Facebook page. It's astonishing what this guy has accomplished. And he did overnights at DRC back in the 80s, 90s.
Well,
Ron, though, being an extra doesn't pay a lot of money. I mean,
but
you spend
Jim, this guy
hours.
he's really more than an extra. He's the guy, like if you see a star, if Brad Pitt's standing in front of something, the guy behind him, that's Bob O'Brien.
It's like Russ DeBello is doing that, I think, down
in right. Well, you can make a good living doing that.
He's making a good living, actually.
I want to hear the Giants story, Dick, only because of the fact we have a mishmash of people, and that was a while ago, and I'm not really that clear on the Giants and Buckley. What was that about?
Well, it goes back to the late 80s and mid 80s, mid 80s rather. And hello, Claudia. That's the ladies. And we brought in Marty Glickman to do UConn, which in and of itself was one of the greatest things we'd ever done, because he was without question one of the nicest, most human people that I had ever worked with in my life. And I was proud to count him as an actual close friend. And so at one point, Barry and I were talking about the fact that the Giants only had like 3 or 4 radio stations in their network. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, we have 5 times that in the UConn network. How could the New York Giants not have more stations? And I realized, they're on WNEW, and NEW has a good signal, but they were playing more games at night now. And NEW's signal at night was directional, and you couldn't hear it in Connecticut. Anyway, long story short, Marty arranged a meeting with Wellington Mara, the Giants, and we wound up taking over the network. And DRC was one of the first stations that picked up the games. As a matter of fact, we went from about, I don't know, from about 3 or 4 stations, like 40 in 2 weeks. It was unbelievable. Anyway, so I'm talking to Rick about the Giants, and this is many years later. This is probably about 95 or something like that. And we had lost our contract for the network to CBS because they had taken over, I forget whether it was CBS or another entity had taken over WNEW's contract. And they never had to do anything. All I did is write them a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars every year as their percentage of the billing, but that wasn't good enough because you know how that works. So I was talking to Rick and I said, let's go after the Giants' rights. They're up again. And I'll get a hold of Tim Mara and let's sit down and see if we can work something out, because I had already talked to Tim about going back and getting their primary rights, not just the network rights, but actually the origination of the broadcast. And Tim had thrown out some stupid number back at that time of like $7 or $8 million a year. And I told him, I said that the math does not work. So I was talking with Rick and he says, oh, no, I'm going after them. I said, well, if you go after them, that's up to you. What would you do? He said, well, I'll put them on in New York. What was it? WR? I'm trying to remember the station in New York.
OR.
It was OR. Yeah. And I said, well, then let us buy the network from you and we'll manage that. And you do the primary and everybody's happy. And we have the experience, and we'll sit down with Wellington and work this out. And he said, no, he says, I want all the rights. I said, Rick, understand the starting point right now is $8 million. There's only one team in the NFL that's getting anywhere near that. And that's the Bears. And they were getting those kind of numbers. And I think they were on LS or maybe BBM. But that was the franchise from the very beginning. And so that worked. He said, I'm going to go after it. I said, fine, but let's make a deal where I can pick up some of the cost, handle the network, and everybody can work together. Long story short, he didn't want to do that. So he went ahead and he cut a deal with the Giants, basically through my introduction, and took them over and ran them on OR and just went right down the toilet.
Yeah,
it just never worked. It was not so much, he didn't change the broadcast at all, which was fine because the broadcast was always good. There was no reason to do it. And he tried to network and he couldn't do it. And he wound up basically bonusing about 50% of his inventory to advertisers that were going into the Giants. And he ran them, I think, for about 2 or 3 years, and then he couldn't do it anymore. As I was with him at an NAB toward the late 90s. And he had just given up the rights, and he walked up to me and he said, Dick, he said, I have to tell you something. You were right. I didn't go up to him and go, see, I didn't want to rub it in or anything like that, but he admitted it. And I said to him, you just have to do the math before you do these things. And what was guiding him was his emotional connection to wanting to be the voice of the New York Giants, the team he grew up with, and all that. It doesn't work when you do that.
But you know something, Dick, I've said this many times, that's what you do though. I mean, you're like, you're a human computer. I mean, when you and I were sitting in on more than one thing, and you spin ratings and dollars in your head without even, pulling out a pencil. It's like, how the hell did you do that?
Well, that's what I did,
Yeah, but that's the great 1-2 punch between you and Barry. I mean, it was just, no matter what the idea was, right away,
I just feel bad for Rick on that one, because I knew that he had always wanted to do it and there was a way to do it, but his emotion got in between in the thought process, and it was sad because he took a hit that he didn't have to take because it was always a moneymaker. But with being on OR, and again, their signal was good in the daytime, not fabulous at night, and yet there was a large audience at night. And it was just a case of, you can only give up so much free inventory to your clients in order to buy them into your Giants broadcast,
Dick,
and it
when
just doesn't
when
make any sense.
when all that went down, this is my recollection because I was around then, I was there then. There was a woman when he got the rights to the Giants. Along with the rights came this lady who was the sales executive, and she had all the contacts on Madison Avenue and all the agencies, and she generated all this revenue for the Giants. And then something happened, and I don't know what happened, but there was a falling out, and she went to ABC, and ABC had the Yankees in those days.
Yeah.
And she went over to ABC and left Rick high and dry, and she took her whole sales department with her, basically. And I guess there was no non-compete, there was nothing like that. And then now Rick was stuck with having Vince Gardino or Jerry Crowley, I forgot who the sales manager was there then, and they had to take their local sales force and try and sell Giants football. Well, selling sports is a completely different, as you know, as most of the guys know, is a completely different animal than selling spots on, on a regular daytime or regular radio station. And they didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And that was one of the problems because the Giants are a premier product. I mean, what's in New York, as bad as the Giants are now, but in New York, even the Jets, nothing compares to the Giants.
Well, and you're selling the emotional connection, with the listener.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, they wanted $8 million back in the early 90s, which, today would translate to probably about 15 or 20 or whatever it is. There's a whole different economy. And going into something like that, saying, well, I've got all this unsold inventory, I can do this, I can do that. All you're doing is digging a deeper hole for yourself, because people have to buy the Giants or any play-by-play entity on the connection it makes with their fans, and the fact that you want to be a part of the value or part of the can't think of the word that I want, charisma of being associated with something like that. But it doesn't always pay out in the real marketplace unless you understand how to pay, how to sell it. Exactly.
And of course, that was before the advent of all the TV money. Now there's so much TV money, and there's getting more and more and more with streaming, because now every streaming platform, Prime, Apple, they all have a portion of the NFL and NBA. Look at the NBA.
Oh,
These guys are making $50 and $60 million a year now, the top players in the NBA, because of its revenue sharing essentially with the players. But the TV money has changed everything. I don't know what it costs, what the cost of doing a radio network for a big time NFL's team is, but it's probably not what it was back then. I'm sure it's not $8 million anymore.
Yeah, but you know something, Ron, and I mean, and we with Lee and Claudia both here. Hi, Lee. We found out, through Al Pellegrino, basically saying, we never bought the ratings, and because of that, we said, well, we don't know. But I would tell you, when you sold local direct, Gary Gerard, God rest his soul, he would run sales meetings, and we'd all be smoking back then, and he had his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he would write across the board. He would write EMD, and he would look at us and go, what does that mean? We'd all go, enthusiasm makes the difference. And that's what it is. That's what it is with the team. It's all about that. And if you got to spend a lot of time explaining their record, if you got to spend a lot of time who's playing or whatever, it is that. I used to try to sell UConn on cable without spots. I don't give a shit there's anything in the game. It's just give me the promos. And we had people back when we were selling UConn at POP that would automatically, they buy it because they think the people that came shopping thought that they were supporting the team. They were supporting the radio station. So I think, and Ron, that's what I thought anyways. And it's the same thing when I was on sales side at 1080. If you didn't understand the enthusiasm of selling 1080, if you didn't have that, or if you couldn't get excited no matter what age you were about Bob Steele, shit, you're not going to make money. And they would say at one point when I was buying TIC, they said something about, well, I said, your rates are lower than they used to be. Well, PPM has changed all that. Well, what are you, an idiot? Nobody's buying PPM when you're selling local direct. It's just like stupid.
Yeah, but unfortunately, PPM did change it all. And then we were on the CRN side. We were Dick. How much money did we make because of PPM? We made between
Oh.
2008 and 2010, millions,
Right.
because there was so much revenue. So we were able to save so much money based on PPM bringing the cost of points down.
Exactly.
And based on the budgets that the clients would give us, the spread was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And those were halcyon days at CRN. I remember that.
And but at the end of the day, one of the major differences was that we were always working on the local level. CRN's point of difference was that we would do all the hard work the agency didn't want to do,
True.
or the client, and then or get into the real, get into the woods for the client in areas that they didn't understand, but they would trust us. And we would be all about the details and all about the delivery. I know I can tell you how many times we went back to radio stations and said, excuse me, we air checked your station. You billed us for spots that we know did not run. Hello.
Yeah, remember that?
It's like that.
Remember we sent
And,
Richard Berman down to Dallas and he
yeah,
ordered
that's
it.
right.
Remember that? It
That's
was
right.
famous. I
And
think
it was
iHeart gave us make goods for 5 years.
for years, because we caught them at fraud and they knew it.
Yeah.
And we could have gotten their license pulled. I mean,
Wow.
it was that bad. But the thing about PPM and with any of the others is that if no matter what numbers you put on a piece of paper, numbers don't buy things. And you just have to really be clear. And what are the points of differences that you're going to communicate the enthusiasm for the product, and then follow the path. Because at the end of the day, we got our renewals based on sales, on results, as opposed to agencies buying numbers because clients were just saying, we got to be everywhere, be heard with everything. And then, the messages that a lot of them had were not logical for what would motivate a person to go out and buy a product, because they were too busy having bought a package or tying in with a particular
So
personality.
that really leads us into personality endorsements. And most of the guys on this call who were at one point or were pretty big time personalities in their own right. How do you guys feel about doing personality endorsements?
I felt good.
Yeah.
Claudia, you were doing morning drive. I remember you.
No, but I mean, and it is funny. And Ron, this is what I really, really, really never heard the term until I came over to CRN. It cracked me up when you could do recorded to sound live, and I went, "Excuse me?" And they said, "Oh no, well, we'll do it recorded to sound live." I said, "What?" They said, "I said he's in the studio." Yeah, and you're playing a recording of him in the studio. Yeah,
right.
So, well, why?
Record.
Well, he might get it wrong, and I'm going, but that could be the best part about the commercial.
Sound human.
That's right.
Yeah, the fact that they would say that, I said, now let me get, and I really was like, understanding this 101, because I never remember that. I remember back in the day, I mean, Jim will attest to it, and a lot of the guys that were on the air, and Bob, and, that was all part of it back then. You weren't getting talent fees. Well, shit. You had a commercial book, and you would do your live spots where the live spots came up. I mean, then, you get, it's just gotten so stupid. And I think, when they were selling that, but Ron, the fun part we had, and you're right, especially when the national guys or you guys said, I don't care, you got to get me this many points. So as a buyer, you didn't care whether we bought, 2 stations or 5 stations, as long as we could deliver the market with that many points.
Meant deliverables, right.
But the major difference was that radio to an agency was a secondary medium, because they never got big enough budgets in their mind. They didn't want to deal with it to the level to make it as productive as we were getting done on a local level, as you were getting done on a local level, all you guys, because you were dealing with radio within the marketplace, as an entity within the marketplace, and they were looking at it as an element. But we don't make a whole lot of money, so let's go back to TV so we can get our large talent fees. Although I'll tell you this, we once paid a talent fee. We paid Jim Nance, I think it was $250,000 to record about 5 or 6 Hershey, or I forget whether it was for Hershey or whoever it was. They wanted him, and he did about 5 or 6 different short programs for us. They paid him, we wouldn't, because I mean, That was a pretty high amount per hour.
Remember we did a deal with Sean Hannity for Dinty Moore beef stew.
Oh yeah.
And Sean, remember that? And Sean Hannity was phenomenal. We went down to New York, we met with Sean. He said, "Oh, I remember my father used to make me when I was a little kid. He used to make me Dinty Moore beef stew. He'd put it on the pot and heat it up. It was so great." He did these great commercials for Dinty Moore beef stew. Ran for 2 weeks, and we got a call. Cease and desist, get it off the air immediately. The feedback was so bad because, well, Sean Hannity, you love
It
him or
was
hate
Sean
him.
Hannity,
A
not
lot
the
of people
product.
hated him, and people were calling Dinty Moore and said, "We're not going to buy your product anymore because you're being endorsed by Sean Hannity," and we had to stop the campaign. And he did such a great job.
Oh yeah, and Barry was going nuts just because it was Sean Hannity to begin with. I mean, we did shows for NASCAR for years and would never call it the Winston Cup because we were so much against smoking. And NASCAR was fine with it. We always called it NASCAR or the stock car racing champion. We never referred to it as the Winston Cup. I don't know that we really had the right to do that, but we asked for permission to do it. It's okay.
I often question the effect that a star, let's say, would have on doing a commercial, how effective it is with the audience with just a recorded spot as opposed to the host of a podcast or the host of a particular show endorsing and doing the spot itself, because you're right there live, you're doing the program, and then you break away and you say, this is like one of the greatest things out, yada, yada, as opposed to getting into a studio and saying, "Hi, I'm Dick Carlton. I'm here to talk to you about blah, 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 blah." I just don't know if that's as effective as doing the program. Jim, you do a podcast, and if you have spots, it's got to have some effect on the audience that way. The personalization, that you know exactly who you are and what you're doing.
I think doing it live, it's sincere,
Exactly.
Yeah, I usually for things like that, I usually grovel. I plead, I beg for stuff like that. I mean, people think that I don't know. When I worked in New York, we got paid endorsements, and I thought that was great. When I worked in smaller markets, I didn't. You mentioned Steve Hartford. When we were in Hartford, we were lucky to. I mean, actually, I didn't want live copy when I was in Hartford because usually it came from what's his name?
Bob Gersman.
Bob Gersman. It was
terrible copy.
Oh my God.
It was 60. It was not 60 seconds worth of copy. It was like 60 minutes worth of copy. I mean, he
fast.
And he would come in and he would shorten it by adding stuff to it.
Yeah.
What? He would come in and he'd pencil stuff out, and then he'd write something in. And I'm thinking, wait a second, you're just moving it, But
He was notorious for that.
He gave new meaning to the term "fly by the seat of your pants" radio.
Yeah, he actually he taught me how to ad lib because I couldn't read his script. I'd start reading it and I'd get lost in his word soup, and so I would start to ad lib, and he would then come in later on because he had memorized his script and say, "I heard that live copy. What the heck was that?
That wasn't how I wrote it. You didn't say it right. That wasn't what I wrote.
Exactly.
Why didn't you read it right?"
I
did my spit all over you at the same time.
I
You
did my
talking about
best, Bob.
Kurzman?
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember, Bob, when I was at POP, you're talking about Kurzman, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I remember him coming to POP and he's in the parking lot. He opens up the trunk of his car and he's got a typewriter. He puts the piece of paper in and that's how he's going to write the copy.
Yeah.
And I was coming back from a call and he goes, "Hey, young lady, hold on a second. Just hold on a second." I'm like, "Who the hell is this?" "Oh, it's Bob Kurzman." I'll never forget it. Whatever.
Yeah. No, I know my dad used to just take Kurzman's copy and grab his pen and go without Bob. He goes, "Okay, go ahead."
Edit it. Yeah.
Steve, I remember back in the Big D days when we were in the studio and we had a book with a lot of live spots in there, and from time to time we'd run across just a fact sheet, and you had to ad lib around the fact sheet. And I had never done that before in my, career. And so it was kind of difficult, but I listened to somebody like Dick McDonough do the same thing. And I would just be amazed at how creative, some of these guys can be with just a fact sheet. Jim, you probably did that too.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I liked them better because I could just go off in my own little fantasy world.
And that's what makes it work. Because you're the personality that thousands of people are listening to. And when you're doing a spot in your own words, you're using a fact sheet. That is the most effective way of doing a personality.
Well, we did the same thing at WPLR. We very rarely did scripts, and we did a lot of live stuff because that was just part of our sound. But with Stoneman, we used to give him fact sheets like 3 bullet points. And because we knew that his attention span wouldn't go beyond that. And the fact was that how he sold was when he was human and Stoneman, not just sit there and talk about, so it was a whole different thing. But we were live all the time. The only difference was that in many cases it could get edgy because we were playing outside the lines from time to time. And then Bob Herpy would come in and say to me, did you just hear that? Are we going to be in trouble with that one? But that was what made life interesting.
Well, Brad
Okay,
Davis
I
was-
have to say goodbye.
Bye-bye,
I have
Audrey.
a doctor's
Bye-bye.
appointment, and I want to tell you, I'm heading to the big city tomorrow,
New York.
Schenectady.
Oh, of course. Yes.
81 WGY.
All right.
Oh, better than Troy.
I know
Okay,
GY.
easy. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you,
Bye,
Claudia.
Claudia.
Bye.
Brad Davis
know,
was notorious.
That's the
for-
best. Brad was the best because
Yeah,
first
I mean,
of all,
he
Brad
could-
Davis he would want to meet with the client
Always.
before the campaign started.
Yep.
Let me go and talk to them and see their business and
Yep.
talk to the owner. And you'd bring Brad out, and of course, Brad was a star, and the owner, they were in awe. He's a big star coming to my business. And then they would discuss with Brad what they were trying to achieve. And Brad just took it all in. And then he would go on the air when the thing started, and he didn't need paper. He didn't need a script. He just went on. I mean, that was one of the great things about Brad, his talent. He was my friend. So we started with friends. We had a woman on there for 20 years, Valerie
Thomas.
Valerie Thomas.
Valerie
she
E.
had
Thomas. Yeah.
She had she's a financial consultant. And Brad did her spots for 20 years. And I'm telling you, it was just phenomenal. The success he built her business and made her rich. And many others I could point. I always go back to Harv Lippman, the original endorsement for Brad Davis with his Jeep and his Renault Fuego, which he crashed and then got his
I got to take a call. It was great talking to you guys. I should have been doing more listening than talking, but it was great seeing you again.
Oh,
I'm
Dick,
honored
it's
to be part
See
of
you,
this
Dick.
group.
Good
I
to
got to
see you.
take this call. Take care,
Dick.
guys.
Hey, Dick.
Bye.
Hey, Dick. Hey, Dick. Oh, missed him.
No, McDonough was also good at that game. Up here, when he was working here at MAS in the later years, he used to do these spots for the Celery Stock restaurant, this little hole in the wall eatery in West Springfield. And he would get on there and sell this thing like it was the next best thing since sliced bread. And it was all ad lib. I watched him do it in the studio up here, and he was fantastic at that also.
Dick was thinking of his appetite at the time when he was doing it.
Priorities.
Yeah.
Ron has mentioned on several occasions that he and I listened to Tony Kornheiser's podcast. And Kornheiser used to do all of his spots live, as is the case on podcast. But I remember one time when they had, I think Bud Light was a sponsor, and for some reason, whether it was just because Tony wanted to do it this way or because Bud Light wanted him to do it, it was this record live record as if live. And now all of his spots are like that. He doesn't do anything. He does it the first time they record it. If he doesn't screw it up, that's what they play for the rest of the time. And discussion groups with his fans, we even people who are not in the business have noticed that that's what he's doing, and they don't like it.
Right.
Now, look at
I
Howard
agree.
Stern, man. Howard Stern, when he does it, and he gets results.
Yes.
No matter how you
Yeah.
feel about Howard, people follow him like mad. And he'll
Al
even
Franken records his too.
really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of people must. Because
sounds
in podcast, there are a lot of, at least 50% of all the spots are live reads by the hosts.
Well, Julia Louis Dreyfus has a great podcast. It's all about these women that have influenced her life, and she's had, oh my God, she's had Jane Fonda on there. I think she's had Carol Burnett. She's had everybody, all these women that she looked up to. But that thing is chock full of spots. They are live spots. She's got a furniture place. She's got everything in there, and almost oversold. But these are not recorded to sound live, because she walks into them right while she's doing her podcast. And, but they've gotten a little bit crazy as far as some of the pricing on some of this. But I'll tell you, and we had a client here, the Dvorak's, Gold Bond.
Gold Bond.
They've been doing
Gold Bond mattresses.
Yep. They've been
Bob
making
Dvorak
mattresses here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
All my mattresses are Gold Bond
And
that I bought at Bedding Barn. We're down here in Florida.
Yeah, right.
Made in
But
Hartford,
they are.
bought in Florida.
Well, they are handmade. I've gone in there, I've watched them. They will not send anything online. They'll sell anything online. It's the Dvorak family, and he was the one that told Bedding Barn to be on the radio with me. He said, to make this deal, I want to make sure that you're on TIC with Steve. But the funny thing was, Bedding Barn, the sales rep came back to me and they said, "Okay, Steve, here we go. Thanks a lot. Give me a plug." But they said,
I like that, Lee.
But they said, in order for the rep came back and said, "So you're going to record 3 commercials and you're going to get paid talent on each one?" I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Every single one of them is done live, and they're going to give me talent for every time I read that spot. Otherwise, there's not going to be a deal." And he did, because, he's found more ways throughout the years. I did spots 20, 30 years ago that he still runs. But, it just sounds so terrible when you're running within your own show.
Oh, yeah.
Commercial. Like, hi, this is me.
Well, back in the day for television, I would watch the Jack Benny show, and Jack Benny would incorporate the commercial as part of the show, the script. He'd be talking about something, and then he'd bring in the quartet in there, and they would be talking. Next thing you know, they're doing a jingle about Benny, and then at the end they'll do add the Lucky Strikes in there. And he did that with a lot of the commercials he did there, worked them into the script of the show. And that's no different than what we do now with the live stuff.
On the video
Well, that was
podcast, a lot of
Bob
times.
Ellsworth. Bob said when he first started doing television years ago, as a newsman, you always did commercials. He said you get up from the desk, you'd walk over to the car, you'd show them the new Plymouth, whatever it was. But he said that was part of the job back then, and it's just amazing.
There's video of Sinatra in the late 1950s when he was at the height of his singing, doing a live Chesterfield cigarette program sponsored by Chesterfield. Sinatra singing and holding the cigarette in his hand, coughing while he's singing, turning away from the camera, coughing, and then walking over after a song and delivering a spot for Chesterfield. So it was like nonstop Chesterfield cigarette, either him smoking or him coughing. And just singing brilliant.
There's an endorsement.
Yeah. So,
Well, they used to be the shows used to be named after the sponsor. It's the Lucky Strike
That's right.
program starring
Yeah.
Jack
Yeah.
Benny, and now a word from our alternate
Right.
sponsor, because the following week it'd be
Right.
somebody else.
Hey, I'm in the Carter Mario studios every Saturday. Everybody in there is the Carter Mario Studios. You saw that,
on
right?
video podcasts these days, you'll see the segment, and then they'll go to a spot and you can see it was pre-recorded because they're the same guy but wearing a different shirt or something or a different background, and then it switches back to the podcast, and that you can tell that it was recorded to sound live. But it just doesn't flow. It
I
doesn't
got to
flow.
get out, but I just want to take one quick thing. There's a company called Athletic Greens, AG1. I don't know if you guys know what it is. It's a supplement. It's vitamins, probiotics, and all that. This morning, the CEO was on CNBC in an interview. Her advertising base is podcasts. Andrew Huberman, Ben Greenfield, a lot of these top health and fitness podcasts. In 2010, they started the company. This year, they will do $600 million in sales, and the value of the company is $1.3 billion. Thanks to podcasting.
Wow.
With that, I say, gentlemen, I got to go. I'll see you guys next week.
Jim Harrington. Jim Harrington. You've
I
got to
know.
get a rep, man, to sell your show because that show is terrific. You and Bill do such a wonderful job. I try to tune in almost every day.
I got to do it. Problem
Well,
is, I
all you
spend so
gotta
much
do,
time.
all you gotta do, Jim, and I can introduce you to some people. There are some great companies out there that will put you in with other ones. I mean, I think it was at Podbeam and some of those other ones where you can get on their network. I don't know how they figure out what you're getting.
I think he's on Podbeam already.
Yeah, well,
I'm on so many networks right now that I don't know how many networks I'm on. Seriously.
No, but I mean, there's sales groups that'll go around and take your show as well as so many other ones, and they go out to all of these other places and put your
Monetize it.
Yeah. The other thing was, and I want to, especially because I got Dave Nagel here and who else was I looking at? Yeah, and also Bob Marks. You guys, I heard first Dave, I heard that Gatsack owns JMJ. Is that right, or does he just own the equipment, and the Archdiocese has it, or how does that work?
It's a kind of a cloudy relationship that I'm not entirely sure of. I heard the same rumors that he technically, the deal he's got, my understanding is, he owns the studios, he owns the property, basically, he owns the equipment. And he has a deal with the Archdiocese where he takes care of them. I think they are the licensee of JMJ, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But he also, it started back in the day somehow, back when 20 was for sale, Channel 20, I believe he ended up it had to be sold to a nonprofit or a not-for-profit organization for some reason, and he bought it. Then he sold it.
And he's got money, I understand, too. Gatsack.
They maintain the land rights. They actually put a second tower on the property up out in Prospect when I was there for cell repeaters. So they're renting out stuff, tower space as well. So they're doing okay. He's not known for overpaying his air staff.
Yeah, like me.
Right.
Yeah, and most of the guys that work there, I mean, most of them came through Big D, and they're all old seasoned pros. I don't mean to call them old, but it's the guys who have pretty much been around for a while and are just happy to be on the air.
Oh yeah, and how can you come out like Jerry Christopher did? What was it, last year or the year before, and announce his retirement that he's going to be leaving at the end of blah blah blah? And I'm going, really? I mean, how many times would somebody come on the air and say that? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah.
Are we losing Bob?
Yeah.
Yes.
Bob
Yes.
Marks.
I was just bowing out, so I gotta go.
Okay. So Bob, real quick, Bob, who owns your operation and how do they do things?
Well, it's not really owned by any corporation or anything. It's I think wholly owned by the board of directors. It's a not-for-profit, Christian radio station. So, we have a president, general manager, and a board. I really never looked into that. All I know is they pay me every month. So
that's it. No questions asked.
Checks don't bounce.
No, I get that. Okay, Bob, and I love the Cavs. Okay.
Hey,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks
God bless
for the
you
nice
all.
words.
Yep.
Thanks, buddy.
WJMJ doesn't subscribe to the ratings, so you never see them where they're showing up. But I would love to see some kind of an impartial or an impromptu type of survey and find out where they would show up, because I think they're a pretty popular radio station.
They
Are
are
they play standards? Are they a standards? You know,
No,
adult
they're
stuff?
like light AC. They're like what you had in mind, Bob, when you were doing YZ.
Mhm.
Oh, so didn't they used to play, you know, like a lot of standards
They
and
did.
like
They
that?
did
They're
back
not
when Walt Pinto was programming. They had a lot
okay.
of standards mixed in and running Robinson's American Standards by the Sea on Saturday evenings, things like that. So yeah, it did evolve from that.
Is that where
Uh,
Floyd worked?
yes, yeah,
Yes.
Floyd did
Right.
afternoons for me when I was the PD there. So
And I bet you if you get Judge, if you get a hold of Clark Smith, because they come up in the ratings still. So even though they don't subscribe, they show up.
Do they? I've seen some things he's published, but I've never noticed JMJ in the list there. Where do they show up?
I don't know. And I mean, Dave, I think you guys still, as far as I remember, I thought JMJ still did show up in them, even though you guys don't, and I could be wrong, but I thought they did.
we didn't buy them, but we used to show.
Yeah.
That much I know. I had obviously friends at other stations in the
Yeah.
market
Yeah.
who did buy the ratings.
The
So
the signal is slightly hobbled. It's not equivalent to the big class Bs in Hartford because it's a little further out and it's over a mountain ridge and stuff, but it's not bad.
no, and now they moved it like a year ago, year and a
Right.
half ago. So
Mhm.
they're now on, I believe, 61's tower over here in Farmington. Brand new processing. Their signal in Hartford is actually improved in the metro area. But you're right, they don't have the reach they used to. Because they were coming out from somewhere up near Torrington originally, the previous tower. But
Where are the studios?
Prospect. They're in Prospect up on top of, I can't think of the name of the hill, but there's a hill in Prospect right
And
now.
nowadays your studios can be anywhere you want them to be. There's no more law. So
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Weren't they in
But-
Bloomfield at one time?
JMG was in Bloomfield. They were in the basement of one of the buildings at the seminary up in
At the
Bloomfield.
seminary, yeah.
Yeah.
which is the licensee.
Yes.
It's the actual seminary.
I remember going to see the old studios guy, Fred Swanson, who used to do news at DRC, was actually on the
Great
air at
guy.
JMJ at the time. Matter of fact, that was probably the last time I saw Fred. Great guy, exactly. And I just remember walking in and there was like, it was moldy ceiling and dripping pipes and stuff. And they were saying back then, it's like, yeah, we're going to move soon. We're going to move soon. I'm like, God, I hope so. Went through it with John. I think that was John Ramsey I went through it with, who was their engineer for a while.
Yeah. I think Lee, one of the things that was so great was not subscribing to the ratings because I'd call agencies and just say, how did we do? I'm selling the station by every amount we did. It was really, wow, you guys really did well in this and you got this, this, and this. Maybe, and I never was looking for the buy, but I was looking for the buy. And it was just like, we fell off of the truck somewhere, but you'd always have somebody like at Mince and Hoke, to call up and say, geez, how did we do in the ratings? And
It's like the old joke about the two mind readers. Hey, you're fine. How am I?
No, really, it was really, really funny to see that because we did. I mean, especially with the POP, never show up. But if even with the JMJ, if they didn't, you're selling what the format is. Somebody either wants to be on a religious station or they don't. I mean, if they want that, then they're going to have it. It's just. But yeah, and they do. They do a great job. I have so many people that it's basically full service with a little bit of, from what I gather, from a little bit of, some religious stuff thrown in there. But
yeah, it's the religious side of things does reserve certain portions of each hour. I mean, there's certain things that come up periodically throughout the day, like the Angelus comes up 3 times a day, things along that line. Father John has pre-recorded things that he has obviously pre-recorded. Some of them he's been running for years.
Yeah.
And I know some of them, when I was there, I ended up recutting opens and closes to take Walt Pinto off some of them. And now I'm still hearing me, and I haven't been there in 7 years. But then again, we didn't get paid to voice that stuff. They claim everything you did there is their property, so that's fine. You know, it's how it works.
We got Clark Smith dropping in here, and I think if there was anybody that knew anything about ratings with JMJ, Clark would probably have a pretty good. Clark, do we ever have JMJ showing up in the ratings?
No, JMJ doesn't seem to show in the ratings. Sorry, I'm late, guys. Really.
No, that's okay. I would occasionally see them showing up, and I guess they have in the past.
No,
but maybe
they
not now.
don't, and it's funny because in most markets, public radio or religious radio does show up in the Nielsen PPMs and whatever, but in the Hartford area, neither WJMJ nor WWUH show up.
Really?
How about CCC?
Oh yeah, I sent the Hartford summary to you and selected folks. I didn't think I did it on the entire playlist that you have, but I sent it out last Saturday morning, so I can read.
No, you're always bringing us up to speed. This just came to mind while I was talking to them.
Yeah,
because
Clark, is that because they don't subscribe to the ratings? Is that why they don't show? Or
well, it's strange. A few years ago, Arbitron started to accept public radio stations. So Connecticut Public has shown up. The #1 radio station in Washington, D.C. is always American University. So, you know, there is a trend that public stations do get listed. Of course, both BUR and GBH are listed in Boston, and so is the Rhode Island Public Station and WFCR in Springfield, Hartford. But some of them are left out. I mean, even in Providence.
POP 104 always showed up. You know, it might
Say
be
again?
down in the grid, but POP and 104 always showed up. So, and Al was not going to pay for a book, not book one.
Well, this time around, I can't grab it immediately. Wait a second. I can grab it immediately. POP ended up like number, I don't know, 20.
They're in there?
It was the bottom of the pile.
With a .1. I was just looking at that. Yeah, Clark, they were at the
POP
very
is number
bottom.
21.
Yeah.
With an O2 and a 7,000 cum in Hartford, which is just sad. DRC AM and FM did okay this time, but the rest of DRC FM is number 5. They made a nice jump, and DRC AM can't be.
Hey,
right,
Steve,
well,
when we did
around
the
here
show at POP, we brought the ratings up, what, about a half a point, if that?
Yeah, well, POPAM was number 19. So, oh yeah, there it is. Red Wolf, 14 is DRC, AM, 171919, 38,000 cum, number 15. It does beat WKCI in Hartford, and NU and the sports station is only a 1-3. So
Yeah, that's
happy to resend this to you.
No, I you know something, Clark. I just was curious. I'm not, and honestly, I've never really, you know, I don't really don't do well with those things, and it had a lot to do with me not selling the ratings. Even though I had the ratings, I'd have to explain the friggin' things. I used to have a great Lori Placharzik who was with us at CRN, sweetest woman in the world. I could write all this stuff out, and I go, okay, I send it to the client. What the hell do I tell them now? she would actually write it out for me. I was like, okay, now I get it. Because I always, you know, I always felt from a local standpoint, you know, I really couldn't get that crazy with that stuff. I really would make myself nuts.
Funny story. A long time ago, a buddy of mine, Rich Doucette, who used to sell for the night quality stations, flew out to Chicago to pitch somebody, and threw all the ratings on her desk, and she said, "I don't care about the ratings. You've got to buy. Let's go to lunch." So,
she needed a drink.
I got a story about ratings. When I was first selling at WPOP, I was brand new there in the sales department. and I was making a telephone call to a Mechanic Savings Bank.
Oh, yeah.
And I forget who I was talking to, the president or the advertising director. I said, "Oh, this is Hal Whitney, WPOP. I'd like to talk to you about getting it on the radio." He says, "You guys, you don't even show up in the ratings anymore." I said, "Oh, sir, have you seen the latest book? We're doing very well in the ratings." He said, "Oh, who goes by that?"
Damned if you do, damned if you don't, huh?
Exactly.
Hey,
Oh,
is that Jack Carney who worked at WIOF?
That's him, but he hasn't been able to
Hey,
get
Jack,
on.
it's good to see you.
We're having a hard time. I don't know if he doesn't have a mic on his end or whatever, but hopefully we can get him.
Well, Jack is listening, I think, because he's been on the whole time. So
yeah.
can somebody say something nice about him so he'll join us again next week?
Well, yeah, I mean, in 15 years, I'd love to see him.
Hey guys, before when Ron was talking about Stone Man at PLR, is that Bud Stone, Al Santos?
No.
Okay.
No.
Al Santos was Al Dark.
Bob Dark.
Bob Dark.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
At NHC, he was Bud Stone.
Right.
There was also a Bud Stone at HYN. And
Yes, there was. Yeah. Yeah.
I used to work
Bud
with
Stone.
Wasn't there
in
a
the
Bud
60s.
Stone at CSB too, who worked?
Yeah.
HYN was Tom.
And then there was Pete Stone.
Thank you, Norm. Yes.
and Jack Stone and Bob Stone and Ralph
Stone,
Actually, it was Pete
WKBR.
Stone.
We're all
but,
I think we were all stoned at one point.
Still are.
No, that I had one client who used to say, "Well, your radio station doesn't come up in our in-store surveys," and I went, "But you don't advertise with us." He goes, "Yeah, but we'd still know." I said, "Yeah, but our listeners wouldn't be coming into your store. They're not hearing anything about you." I was never gonna win that battle. But
It's a good line though, Steve. It's a good line.
It's trying to change somebody's politics. You never will. So
You can't win if you don't play.
there you go.
Always, yeah. It was always interesting until Ron threw me and Dick threw me into the sales pit for, I think I was in that thing for 4 years in a basement, which is not where you want me. And oh my God, because we were playing beat the clock all the time, and it was all about ratings, and then the other thing that was tough when you were dealing with CRN, if we had something like Hershey, or if we had a beer or something like that, only a certain percentage of your buy could go at that key demographic. You couldn't try to get more people to drink. You couldn't try to get more kids to eat sugar. It was like, oh yeah, you did a great job at the buy. Well, you got this percentage. It was brutal. But well, listen, guys, I wanted to just real quick. We're going to leave, but Tracy, any comments about that article I sent out to everybody? Is that just like a congratulatory thing or what?
Oh, it was written by Ken Deutsch, aka Ken R., who's well known in the industry, has been around a collector forever. It's a milestone. I mean, TM has been around longer than JAM, but JAM has been continuously owned by John and Mary Lynn. They started as a small company, and really it's a mom and pop shop these days because you don't need to have the full-time staff, the full-time writers, the full-time singers. It's not what it used to be, but they're still plugging along, and knock on wood, they've managed to survive, and John runs the ship the way he likes to run it. And it's kind of amazing. You can ask him to pull a rabbit out of his hat and he'll pull out a memo that he wrote in 50 years ago, or some communication back with the folks. Like I remember what was his name that worked with Bob Craig at Magic.
Julian Breen.
Yeah, Julian. He'll pull out a memo from Julian Breen from 100 years ago. So no, there's not a lot to say. I mean, the singers have changed, obviously.
Tracy, did they buy Pam's?
Yes,
they
Okay.
did. What
Sort of,
happened with
right?
Pam's was the original Pam's. I don't know if you want to tell the story, Pete.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
The original Pam's went out of business in '78. Executive long range planning. Bill Meeks sunk the company. The tapes were out there. Toby Arnold, who's had a company, Toby Arnold Associates, bought the tapes, but didn't have the copyrights. The IRS had them. Then Ben Friedman. I mean, it comes convoluted unless you followed all the matching pieces and put them all together in the puzzle. Bottom line is around 1990, 91-ish, John ended up with the rights to the materials and all the tapes and is doing re-sings on the stuff to this day.
Same singers in their studios,
No, not
right?
this, not the same singers. They're different singers,
Yeah.
the same parts, the same, the same charts.
Yeah,
I
same
thought
charts. I mean, the people that, I mean, listen, Pam's was from 55. They started, I mean, the original singers, the people that wrote that stuff, Jody Lyons, Bob Farrar,
Bella Hart.
those people are long dead.
Oh,
I mean, just long.
even the singers who did our stuff at Waves and KCI and YNY and all them, half of them were dead or in their 80s, so they don't sing anymore. But he has been able to put together a group of singers that sound as much like those as he can.
As approximate as you can. You're not going to be able to
Yeah.
reproduce the sound of Marv Shaw, who sang the high male voices on like Where the Action Is, the Jet Set. You're not going to be able to match
Or Jim Clancy.
Well, Jim Clancy. No, you get Jeff Oxley, who does the bass parts now. Greg Clancy's one of the owners of TM, Jim's son. It's the best that there is. The only one that's been singing that I can think of off the top of my head that's still around from the Pam's day is Abby Holmes, who in New Haven, you would have heard her voice all over Stereo Island on WKCI FM.
Yes.
She was the female voice, double, triple.
Tracy, is there a market for jingles anymore? I mean, are stations buying them like we did?
They're not buying them like they did in the day. A lot of stuff is being done on trade. The cheapest out there, or the least expensive, I don't want to use the word cheapest, is Real World. There's a limited marketplace for the stuff. I guess that's the best way to put it. Everybody wants to have that, what I call the screeching vocals, like the high female. That's what's on a lot of the radio stations.
When I worked on about 3 or 4 years ago, I did mornings on something called Solid Gold USA. They tried to emulate WABC, and they actually went out and went to jams and created jingles that sounded just like the Pam's jingles back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And
Love to
so
hear that.
that's why I mean it was amazing. It sounded terrific to hear these jingles again, but I can see where there's no market for it anymore.
Well, there's a limited marketplace. Even look at the jingle that I had redone for Radio Friends again. I mean, you're talking about a cut that was sung for WDRC in February of '71. I mean,
Yeah.
think about that. How many years
I
ago?
was there.
Had
That's
to dig out
53 years ago.
Yeah,
Wow.
53 years ago.
Tracy, so is TM gone? Was that in your letter?
No, TM is in existence. It's owned by 3 gentlemen. Greg Clancy, the son of Jim Clancy, who sang the bass in all the classic jingles. Dave Bethel, who's out in Los Angeles. He'll be out here the next month to comb through the archives I have here looking for some stuff. And Chris Stevens, who lives over in the UK, who worked in Dallas. He was there in the early 2000s. So the 3 of them bought it from Westwood One, and it's still, they're doing new things with it. They're still singing the old stuff.
They did some killer work for me in the early 2000s. I mean, just killer jingles, the best.
And again, the people that did that stuff are probably Barry Young and Greg Clancy, and they're still there. I mean, it's a small shop, just like Jam is these days, but they do killer work. The fun thing, which I was online from there a few weeks ago, the Killer's going to be bringing the reference tapes up here. They don't have the space they used to, so I'm moving their tape archives up here to Massachusetts. God help me.
You know what's crazy? I had a jingle made for something we were doing on the station, and one of the guys on the show bought it in Brazil, and the guy turned it around for $15. For $15, I mean, I thought to myself, how can jingle companies compete nowadays when you can have a guy? And by the way, you would think, well, the guy had to sing it with a Portuguese accent. No, guy sounded like he was right down the street.
Listen, the technology is out there, and it has even beyond jingles. I go on and I take a look. I've got multi-tracks for songs sitting over here. I mean, you want to remix Let's Stay Together, I've got a copy of the 8-track master. You want to remix What's Going On, I've got a copy of the 16-track Marvin Gaye master sitting here. The stuff is out there. And then with AI, which brings a whole new flavor to this stuff, I can go out there, I want to hear Moonlight Feels Right without the vocals. Someone's electronically with AI gone out there and removed the vocal from it. The exclusivity, I don't know if that's the right word, probably not.
but the proprietariness, I guess that would be it of this stuff. The stuff is just easily created, replicated today like it could never be done before. And, we used to have a whole orchestra come in. Now you need a keyboard, Pete can attest, he can play the parts. You have the keyboardist come in, you have a singer come in. I sit here and listen to WARE doing oldies, and I hear I can't think of her name. Isn't that horrible? Think of her Mary Name Winkham. I hear her voice screeching Pioneer Valley weather. And to me, it sounds like garbage, but that's what contemporary radio wants today. The music, the jingles have to sound like the music, but the music isn't much better than the jingles.
Someone suggested on Facebook that we should start doing jingles for the FM translators. W255 CK.
Well, they usually try to sneak those at the top of the hour, don't they? Like music for us, so you can't really hear what it is anyway. But it's
WVWA Pound Ridge.
Listen, the radio's come full circle. I remember going down for a dinner in Dallas to honor Tom Merriman in 2008, September 2008. And I was sitting there talking to Tom Parma, who had been with the industry, he and his wife, since 1958. I mean, his wife, Judy, was singing cuts. She's playing hooky in high school to sing jingles at Future Sonic. And the comment he made, and this is, again, we're talking 2008, what are we in, 24? He said, I was there when the industry began, and here I am here when the industry is ending. And I don't think the industry will ever be what it was. I think that, we all have the memories, Winston tastes good like a cigarette should, I love New York, Steve Carmen stuff. It just isn't as creative. It doesn't need to be. It really has turned into what John Wolford used to joke: more drums and call letters.
There you go. Then there are artists who can do it in their basement and sound like they're doing it in a major studio nowadays. You can do it at home.
Yeah, well, they can do entire songs.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I was impressed when I was down there. They were singing a re-sing. They did a package for WLS FM. And I don't know if I mentioned this on this call, but I was laughing because Greg said, you're going to love sitting in this session. These singers can't read music. I said, okay. He said, they can't sing. So I sat there in the studio, and Greg was leading them. There were two females and a male aside. There were four singers total. And Greg's looking at one of them. He goes, you want to sing this? You want to scoop down here? They knew exactly what he was talking about. And they did a re-sing for the WLS FM package, and none of the three singers other than Greg could read a note of music.
That's nuts.
And it was John Wolford that was on the cover of that article I sent out, right?
Right. Yeah, John Wolford, WLFERT. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jonathan. And listen, he worked for Pam's. He used to collect the stuff like I did, and I see you down there, Dave. I get the
some of
message.
the earliest stuff he did for Bob. Right, because he did it in Philadelphia for WMGK, and that was in
he did it for Magic.
Yeah.
His Pete Mockover, his old high school or college, college roommate, was at Magic, and I've got all those tapes from Julian Breen's collection. All the
some of the most beautiful jingles you've ever heard.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Pete Mockover, Norm, is that the Pete Mockover
That's
from our
him.
college station?
That's him. There's
This
only
is a
one
good-
Pete
Somebody
Mockover,
just mentioned
yeah.
Pete
Was he-
Mockover.
Yeah,
Only one Pete Mockover, and he was John's roommate in college.
He was a data cruncher.
Pete
Yes.
Mockover.
Yes.
Pete Mockover wound up in Philly programming WPEN when it was oldies in the mid '70s. Would that be?
with
Norm,
Jeff
how can
Fox.
that be? He was never on the air.
Well,
No,
he did.
He
No.
wasn't. He wasn't on the air in Philly at all. I
Listen,
think.
I had to copyright. I owned past tense the service mark Boo Bash, and I got the lawyer I used to do it outside of Philadelphia, a guy named Norman Lear. I got referred to by Pete.
Good guy.
So go figure. This is a small industry, guys.
you worked with
We want
Mockover
to
a
keep
lot.
it all in
didn't
the
you?
family, you know.
Yeah, Mockover
Me?
lives in Atlantic City now. But
Okay.
Yeah, he's still down in this area. I know he was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. When I was at MGK, but I don't know.
He lives near
when
my
he came.
mother-in-law right outside of Atlantic City. So
Pete Mockover did something at our radio station when we were in college, Norm.
I don't remember what he did.
You do remember him though, right? He
I
was a little
remember, yeah,
rotund.
I remember, but I don't remember him doing anything there, really.
And he turned into a research guy.
Right.
Yeah, he was a research guy, yes.
Yeah,
That's
the
why I was
guy.
referred to him, who got me to Norm Lear, because he used to use Norm to do all of his trademarks and service marks.
Mhm.
So again, small industry guys.
All right, guys, I'm gonna have to jump because I'm leaving. Actually, Angela's taking me out of
Go,
town.
see ya, bye.
We're at the Rhode
Leave.
Island for a little bit, but
Nice.
it's anybody want to add anything before we go?
No, I'll see you probably in a, excuse me, in a couple of weeks. We're going away, so either 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Have a
Have a
good
nice trip,
time.
Bob,
Have a
wherever you
good
go.
time,
Have
Bob.
a good
Happy
time, Bob.
trails.
I will be
Please,
up in-
everybody, remember the Broadcasters Foundation of America, because if you're going through tough times, physically, financially, emotionally, whatever, it's a great place to turn to for some great support from some of the guys and the men and the women in the business. Just somebody to talk to that, like we do here. You know, we just all get together and share the brotherhood and today the sisterhood of this business. So we're going to do it again next-
Listen to 1220 WATX, right?
Don't forget. Don't
Still
forget.
trying. Some
Yep.
people never learn.
Yes. No, we don't.
God bless you, Clark. All right. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll catch you next time. Looking to do it again on next Friday, the 20th, right? On Radio Friends again. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next week.
See you later.
Safe
Bye.
trip.
Your friends, radio friends again, radio friends again. We've got a lot to share.